Hello and welcome back to Bits and Bobs. Today's video is the complete history of the shilling, the denomination worth 1/20th of a pound or 12 pence, a coin in use from 1503 to 1970. Now the shilling had been a unit of account since Anglo-Saxon times worth 1/20th of a pound, but there was no coin for the shilling until 1503 when the first shilling, known as a testoon then but having the value of the unit of account of a shilling, was introduced, as we can see here. Featuring a profile bust of King Henry VII, the first monarch to issue a shilling, to the obverse, and to the reverse there, a royal quarter-arm shield with a long cross running through, both sides having a legend running around. Now these first shillings weighed 9.21 grams with a diameter of 29 millimeters and were struck in sterling silver. So here we can see the first coin, quite a large coin, almost 30 millimeters across and almost 10 grams, so a fairly large piece of silver there, and 20 of these would have been used to make up £1 or one sovereign, as Henry VII had issued a sovereign first in 1489 as he reissued the coinage. His successor, King Henry VIII, also issued shillings. We can see there a very recognisable bust of King Henry VIII to the obverse, wearing a crown facing out of the coin, and a crowned Tudor rose with HR for Henry Rex, King Henry, with the crown as well, to the reverse, and once again both sides having a legend around. The weight was a bit different, it was a bit lighter, weighing 7.68 grams, but a larger diameter with 31mm diameter. However, Henry VIII did debase the coins, reducing the silver content to try and get away with using less silver in his coins. His son, Edward VI, also issued shillings, we can see here. They were still a bit debased from his father's debasement, with a profile bust of the young boy king, crowned to the obverse, and an oval-style shield. There's a later design here, as he aged a bit. You can see his portrait there, aged a bit, and then to the side of him, XII for 12 pence, and then once again a quartered royal arm shield to the reverse there, going back to a similar design as the first shilling. These were even lighter once again, with only a 6.2 gram weight, but a diameter of 32 millimeters, so getting larger, therefore thinner as the weight went down. Here we have the next issue of shilling, a Philip and Mary shilling, a very rare one, with a double portrait there, with one crown for both of them to the obverse, and then to the reverse, again an oval-style ornate shield with lots of quarterings in it, and then once again a crown to that, and legends around. We can see there's no border separating the legend and the portrait and the design. More of a modern design motif. Though still debased, the weight and diameter stay sort of the same, 31mm, 6.16 grams for this early hammered shilling. Then we come on to Elizabeth I, who issued many shillings over a long reign. Here's her bust to the obverse, facing left, crowned with a Tudor ruff, and then to the reverse, again a quartered royal shield with a long cross running through, there to prevent clipping of the coin, as the edges could be clipped on hammered coins. The weight of this one was standardized to 6.2 grams and 31mm, the shilling during the reign of Elizabeth I, who also brought them back to being sterling silver, and also issued the first ever milled shilling. As we can see here, this is machine struck rather than hand struck, with a very similar design, but you can see the design is more uniform as it has been done by a machine, and there's milling around the edge to stop clipping. The milled varieties are a bit lighter and a bit smaller, weighing 6 grams with a diameter of 30mm, and again back to sterling silver for Elizabeth I coins. On to James I, you can see here, there's no long cross, but he has a quartered royal shield with a border and legend for the reverse, then his bust there to the obverse, facing to the right, crowned, with behind him again the XII for 12, a 12 pence piece, which is a shilling, as we know. The weight was 6.1 grams for these, and then the diameter was 29.4 millimeters, and he brought back hammered shillings as they were too expensive to make by machine press or milling. Here is a King Charles I shilling, of which there are many varieties. We'll see a few designs here, as of course during the Civil War he had many location mints during that battle, not being based in London. We can see his portrait there, facing left and crowned to the obverse, and usually there's always a shield to the reverse. We can see this one there's a bit more oval style, and has the C and R either side for Charles Rex, King Charles I of course. And like I say, there are Civil War varieties for the shilling. There's lots to collect with the shillings of Charles I, as there are some even unofficial ones and even some Cromwellian ones during the interregnum and such things like that. They weighed 6 grams and were 30mm, but still remained sterling silver for this time. On to King Charles II here. This is the last monarch to issue hammered shillings. You can see here the final ever hammered shilling, with a cross but not going to the edges, with a quartered shield to the reverse, then a portrait very similar to Charles I's portrait of Charles II to the obverse, and the weight was very similar, with a 6 gram weight and a 30mm diameter for the final ever hammered shilling. And then milled shillings were brought in, as it was now less expensive due to technological advancements to make machine-made milled shillings, as beginning in the reign of Charles II. And look at this. This is where the craftsmanship gets much better in my opinion, We have a lovely portrait there, a very realistic portrait of King Charles II to the obverse, with the laureate facing to the right, and then to the reverse there, 4 crowned shields around a central garter star with interlocked C's representing Charles in between. These new milled shillings the first one of Charles II weighed 6 grams with a diameter of 25mm and was struck in sterling silver as before hammered shillings had been. The next monarch was James II, who also issued shillings. You can see here a portrait of him to the obverse, facing left, with quite long hair, draped bust and a laureate, then a similar design to the reverse with crowned shields around a central garter star, but of course no C's as he is not called Charles, but there were no J replacements. The weight for this was 6 grams and a diameter of 25mm in sterling silver. Here is a lovely design, as issued by William and Mary, a double portrait to the obverse, 4 crowned shields around William III's Lion of Orange, with a date to the centre there, and interlocked W's and M's for William and Mary, creating a very busy, but very sort of symmetrical, and just very lovely, in my opinion, design for the William and Mary shilling. A lovely coin indeed. And these shillings weigh the same and have the same diameter and composition as the previous James II shillings. When William took the throne by himself, King William III, we can see there a single portrait, laureate and long hair, draped bust to the obverse, and a similar design to the reverse, still around the Lion of Orange, but no W and M as of course Mary had passed away, but there's no just single W's to replace this, leaving just empty fields between the shields. But the same weight and diameter and composition was kept with 6 grams, 25mm and sterling silver. Now onto the shillings of Queen Anne. We can see here a left-facing, uncrowned with no laureate bust of Queen Anne, draped bust with her hair up to the obverse, and a similar design to the reverse, with the 4 crowned shields, back to being around a garter star, with the plumes of France in between, rather than any A's for Anne. A bit of a larger coin, 6.02 grams, and the diameter 26mm, still selling silver, so a bit more silver in the shillings of Queen Anne. On to the shillings of George I, and again a very nice realistic bust of King George I there, facing to the right, legend around, then a similar design to the reverse, with the crown shields, garter star, and then SSC for the South Sea Company, and there's also a variety without the SSC, as some of the silver for some of the shillings was produced and supplied by the South Sea Company. They're a bit lighter now, only 5.9 grams, but a larger diameter of 26.2mm, so a thinner coin for George I. On to King George II, a very similar bust, but facing to the left this time, as they swap directions of facing, and then a similar reverse design there. We have the now classic 4 crown shields around a central garter star, with the legend around and date to the top. These shillings of George II weighed 6.02 grams, with a diameter of 25mm. And then we move on to King George III, who only issued shillings in 1 year before the recoinage, 1787 as you can see here, a lovely design, a nice regal bust of King George III to the obverse, with wearing military clothing, then a lovely busy design with the shields with the crowns in between rather than on the shields around a garter star, and these weighed 6.02 grams with a diameter of 25mm. Now because all these weights are a bit irregular, George III issued the Great Recoinage after the Battle of Waterloo to recoin the nation. We do have a full video on this, but basically what happened is all silver coins were set to a certain weight, so a shilling weighed twice a sixpence weighed double a threepence, and so on. And the shilling was set to a weight of 5.65 grams with a diameter of 23mm and struck in sterling silver. Now the weight and diameter are fixed, let's look through the designs of these new recoinage shillings from George III onwards. Here is the first design, featuring a Hanoverian shield crowned within a royal shield crowned within an order of the garter to the reverse, and an older portrait now of George III to the obverse, with the date there 1817 below him. The second design, issued in 1821 onwards, has a lovely floral shield, again with a Hanoverian shield inside, crowned with flowers around, and a bust of King George IV, George IV's first bust to the obverse. We have a second design here of George IV shilling, issued in 1824, featuring again a similar design, with a Hanoverian shield in a royal shield crowned with a garter around, date below, and once again the first bust of King George IV to the obverse. The final George IV design, released in 1826, as we can see here, features a crowned lion above a crown with flowers, legend around, and then the second bust of King George IV to the obverse. On to King William IV, who only issued one design. It is this one here, which has 1 shilling to the centre, having a wreath around, date below, crown to the top, and of course his bust by William Wyon to the obverse of William IV shillings. For the young head Victoria shillings, the same design was kept, with the wording 1 shilling to the centre, wreath around, date below, and crown to the top. And this is a design by Jean-Baptiste Melaine. Moving on to the Victoria Jubilee shillings, you can see the Jubilee portrait, with a longer sort of bust there of Victoria, a smaller crown above the veil, Then you have a crowned royal shield, within the order of the Garter and date below for the reverse design, a nod back to older designs. For the final veiled head portrait, we have here the veil, a larger veil over a larger crown for Victoria, and then to the reverse we have 3 crown shields with 3 national flowers, again encircled by a garter. Onto King Edward VII, we have his portrait there by George William de Saules, uncrowned facing to the right, with a lion crowned above a crown, border around and date beside the crown for the reverse design. Onto King George V, the same reverse design was kept, but of course the new portrait by Bertram McKennell was released for the new king, King George V. Now, all these shillings have been sterling silver shillings, but in 1920, silver coins were debased to 0.500 to 50% silver, meaning after 1920, only half of the metal in shillings was actually silver. So the design was kept though for the same for the first ones of after 1920, both obverse and reverse for the King George V 50% shilling, kept the same design as for the earlier sterling ones, as we can see there, with the crowned lion. The design was then changed in 1927, the same obverse was kept, but we now have a bit of a different design there, with the date part of the legend rather than being to the sides of the crown, which is now larger. And then in 1937, Scottish and English designs were introduced, so 2 designs for each year of issue after 1937. Of course, that year was the first year that King George VI adorned the shilling. The same portrait he had for this whole time is this one here by Humphrey Paget on the obverse of all King George VI shillings. Here is the first design. The English design is very similar, with a crowned lion on the crown with 2 roses there. We have a standing lion, or sort of a crouching lion on the crown with a shield, with 2 shields, one having the thistle of Scotland. A very similar design was changed though after 1949 to omit the wording Ind Imp, as George VI was no longer Emperor of India after India was granted freedom. In 1947 though, bear in mind, silver coins are demonetised to cupro nickel, so all issues, although keeping the same weight and diameter and design, were no longer any silver after 1946, and 47 being the first year without silver. Elizabeth II had just 1 design for the shillings. Here is the English design with the 3 lions and a shield crowned, and then there's a portrait as well. And here is the Scottish design with the lion rampant rather than 3 lions in the shield, but overall a very similar design indeed. The shilling was last produced for circulation in 1966, and finally issued a proof in the farewell set of 1970, although it was still used as it was the same size as a 5 pence, and of course 5 pence is worth 1/20th of a pound, as was a shilling, so they were used interchangeably with the 5 pence and a shilling up until 1990, when the shilling was demonetised due to the 5 pence being shrunk down, so the shilling could no longer be used after 1990. So a long life for the shilling, but we finally said goodbye in 1990. So there we go. Please of course do comment down below your favourite design. Is it a hammer design, milled, or one of the great recoinage, post-great recoinage issues? Please of course subscribe to the channel if you've enjoyed. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you again soon for some more coins in the future on Bits and Bobs.